The security guard watched me pack 25 years of my life into a cardboard box, and I knew my world had just ended. My name is David. I'm 58 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had job security that couldn't be touched. I was wrong. Dead wrong. For over 2 decades, I worked at Innovate Corp as a senior account manager. I wasn't just good at my job. I was the best. My clients didn't just trust the company. They trusted me. I knew their kids' names, their business problems, even their favorite coffee orders. When they had trouble, they called me directly. When they needed help, I was there. But none of that mattered to Mark. Mark was 35, fresh out of business school, and full of big ideas about changing everything. The company brought him in as the new director of sales to shake things up. From day one, he looked at me like I was furniture that needed to be thrown out. "David, we need to talk about your methods," he said during our first meeting. He was wearing a $500 suit and had his hair slicked back like some movie villain. "Your approach is very old school." I had been doing things the same way for years because they worked. I wrote handwritten notes to clients. I took them out for long lunches. I remembered their birthdays and asked about their families. These weren't just business relationships. They were friendships built over decades. Mark hated all of it. "We need automated email campaigns," he said, pulling up charts on his laptop. "We need aggressive sales funnels. We need metrics and data points, not whatever this is." He waved his hand at my desk, which was covered with thank you cards from clients and family photos they had shared with me. For months, Mark made my life miserable. He watched everything I did. He criticized my work in front of younger employees. He excluded me from important meetings, then acted confused when I didn't know what was happening. "David, why weren't you aware of this new policy?" he'd ask in front of the whole team, knowing full well he never told me about it. The worst part was watching the younger employees. They used to respect me. They used to come to me for advice. But Mark's constant put-downs were working. I could see doubt creeping into their eyes. Maybe David really was too old. Maybe his ways really were outdated. I started doubting myself too. My confidence, built over 25 years of success, began to crack. I found myself working longer hours, trying to prove I still had value. I started questioning every decision, second-guessing myself constantly. The job that once gave me joy became a source of daily stress. My wife, Sarah, noticed the change immediately. "You're not sleeping," she said one morning over coffee. "You're barely eating. What's happening at work?" I couldn't tell her the truth. How could I admit that after all these years I was being pushed out by someone young enough to be my son? How could I say that everything I had worked for was being taken away by a man who saw me as nothing more than an expensive mistake? "Just some changes at the office," I told her. "Nothing I can't handle." But I was lying to both of us. The breaking point came during our quarterly review meeting. Mark had prepared a presentation with charts and graphs that painted me as a failure. According to his numbers, my performance was declining. My methods were outdated. My results were below average. Every single number was wrong. I had built the strongest client relationships in the company. My accounts generated more long-term revenue than any other manager. My client retention rate was perfect 100% for the past 5 years. But Mark's presentation made it look like I was barely doing my job. "As you can see," Mark said, pointing to a red chart on the screen, "David's numbers have been consistently below expectations. In today's fast-paced business environment, we simply can't afford to have team members who aren't keeping up with modern sales techniques." I wanted to speak up. I wanted to defend myself. But I was surrounded by people half my age, all nodding along with Mark's lies. My voice felt small and weak when I finally found it. "Those numbers don't reflect the full picture," I said quietly. Your clients need fresh energy," Mark interrupted. "They need someone who understands current market dynamics, not someone stuck in the past." The room was silent. I felt every pair of eyes on me, judging me, writing me off. At that moment, I realized Mark had been planning this for months. This wasn't about performance. This was about getting rid of the old guy who made him feel insecure. After the meeting, I sat in my office staring at the photos on my desk. Pictures of clients at company events, thank you notes for deals I had closed, awards for excellence I had won year after year. None of it mattered anymore. 2 days later, Mark called me into his glass-walled office. I knew what was coming. I had seen this scene play out in movies and TV shows, but I never thought it would happen to me. David, I'm afraid we need to discuss your future with the company, Mark said, not even looking up from his computer. There was a smirk on his face, like he was enjoying this moment. We're restructuring the department, he continued, finally making eye contact. Your position is being eliminated. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. 25 years of loyalty, 25 years of perfect performance, 25 years of building relationships and bringing in millions of dollars in revenue. All of it meant nothing, but Mark wasn't finished. He leaned back in his chair, and his professional mask slipped for just a moment. What I saw underneath was pure cruelty. Honestly, David, he said with that same smirk, we need people with more energy. We just can't afford to have anyone moving too old and slow on the team. Too old and slow. Those 4 words echoed in my head as he handed me the termination paperwork. Too old and slow. Like I was some broken-down machine that couldn't keep up anymore. Like 25 years of experience and relationship building meant nothing compared to youth and energy. I signed the papers in silence. My hand was shaking, but I managed to write my name on the dotted line. Mark barely looked at me as I left his office for the last time. The security guard was waiting outside. Company policy, Mark explained. I had to clean out my desk immediately and be escorted from the building. For 25 years, I had walked through these halls with pride. Now, I was being marched out like a criminal. My co-workers watched as I packed my personal items. Some looked away, embarrassed. Others stared openly, probably thinking about their own job security. A few younger employees whispered to each other, and I caught fragments of their conversation. Should have seen it coming. Wasn't keeping up with the new systems. Probably for the best. Each word was like a knife in my back. The cardboard box felt impossibly heavy as I carried 25 years of my professional life to the parking lot. The security guard stayed with me until I reached my car, making sure I didn't try to come back inside, as if I would want to. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, unable to start the engine. This was supposed to be my safe space, my guaranteed future. I had planned to work here until retirement. Now I was 58 years old with no job, no prospects, and no idea what to do next. When I finally drove home, Sarah was in the kitchen making dinner. She took one look at my face and knew. "What happened?" she asked softly. "I got fired," I said, setting the cardboard box on the counter. "Mark said I was too old and slow." Sarah's face went through a range of emotions. Shock, anger, sadness, and finally determination. "That's illegal," she said. "You can't fire someone for their age. We should call a lawyer." "With what money?" I asked. "And even if we could prove it, do you think any company is going to hire a 58-year-old man who sued his last employer? My career is over, Sarah. I'm done." For the first week after getting fired, I barely left the house. I spent most of my time in my home office, staring at the wall and feeling sorry for myself. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't even watch TV without thinking about how I was going to pay the bills. Sarah tried to be supportive, but I could see the worry in her eyes. We had some savings, but not enough for me to be unemployed for long. And who was going to hire someone my age? Mark was right about one thing: companies wanted young, energetic employees, not old, slow ones like me. I started applying for jobs online, but my heart wasn't in it. Every application felt like begging. Every rejection email was another reminder that I was past my prime, unwanted, useless. "Maybe I should just retire early," I told Sarah one evening. "Take whatever Social Security I can get and find a part-time job somewhere. Maybe at the hardware store or something." "David, you're 58, not 88, Sarah said firmly. "You have years of good work left in you. Don't let that horrible man convince you otherwise." But I couldn't shake Mark's words. Too old and slow. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw an old man who couldn't keep up with the modern world. Every gray hair was evidence that I was past my expiration date. Every wrinkle was proof that Mark was right. Then, on day 8 after getting fired, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer it. I was tired of rejection calls and sales pitches, but something made me pick up. "David, thank God I found you. Where did you go?" It was Tom Bradley, the CEO of Bradley Manufacturing. They were my biggest client, or had been my biggest client. I had worked with Tom for 15 years, had watched his company grow from a small operation to a major player in their industry. "Tom?" I said, confused. I don't work at Innovate Corp anymore." "What do you mean you don't work there anymore?" They sent some kid named Chad to our meeting yesterday. He had no idea what our company does. Couldn't answer basic questions about our contract. The deal's off unless you're involved. My heart started beating faster. Chad was one of Mark's new hires, fresh out of college with no experience and way too much confidence. They didn't tell you I was let go? I asked. Let go? David, you're the only reason we stayed with Innovate Corp all these years. Our contract isn't with them, it's with you. Where are you working now? We'll follow you wherever you go. I hung up the phone in shock. For the first time in over a week, I felt something other than despair. I felt hope. But what happened next changed everything. Tom's call was just the beginning. And what Mark didn't realize was that he had just made the biggest mistake of his career. Because sometimes, being too old and slow is exactly what you need to destroy the person who tried to destroy you. That phone call from Tom changed everything. But what happened over the next 24 hours was beyond my wildest dreams and Mark's worst nightmare. After Tom hung up, I sat staring at my phone for a full minute. Then it rang again. David? It's Lisa from Creative Solutions. We just had the strangest meeting with someone from your company. Well, I guess it's not your company anymore. What's going on? Lisa Chen had been my client for 12 years. I had helped her company through 3 major expansions and 2 economic downturns. We weren't just business partners, we were friends. They let me go last week, I told her, still processing what was happening. Let you go? Are they insane? David, you saved our company in 2018. You personally negotiated terms that kept us alive during the pandemic. Who's handling our account now? A young guy named Chad, I think. Lisa was quiet for a moment. Then she laughed, not a happy laugh, but the kind of laugh you make when something is so ridiculous you can't believe it. Chad looked like he was 12 years old and had no idea what our business model even was. He kept talking about synergy and leveraging core competencies. I asked him one specific question about our contract terms, and he had to call his supervisor. My phone buzzed with another incoming call. Lisa, I have to take this. Can I call you back? David, don't call me back. I'm calling you back tomorrow because we need to talk about the future. The next call was from Robert Martinez at Tech Dynamics. Then came Jennifer Walsh from Walsh Consulting. Then Mike Thompson from Thompson Industries. One after another, my former clients were calling. All of them had the same story. Chad or another one of Mark's young recruits had shown up to their meetings completely unprepared. They didn't know the client's history. They didn't understand their needs. They couldn't answer basic questions about existing contracts. It was embarrassing, Robert told me. This kid, Chad, kept checking his phone during our meeting. He called me Rob, even though I told him 3 times my name is Robert. Then he tried to sell me services we already have. By the end of that day, I had talked to 8 different clients. 8 companies that had been with Innovate Corp for years, some for over a decade. And every single one of them was furious about the transition. That night, Sarah found me in my home office, surrounded by notes and phone numbers. You look different, she said. Better. What happened? I told her about the calls, about how my clients were reaching out to me directly, about how Mark's young and energetic team was failing miserably with accounts I had built over decades. So what are you going to do? Sarah asked. I looked at my notes, at the phone numbers of clients who trusted me more than they trusted the company I used to work for, at 25 years of relationships that Mark thought he could just transfer to someone else like files on a computer. I'm going to start my own company, I said. The words surprised me as much as they surprised Sarah. I hadn't planned to say them, but as soon as they came out of my mouth, I knew they were right. Your own company. David, that's a huge risk. What if I fail? Sarah, I've already failed. I got fired for being too old and slow. I've got nothing left to lose. But that wasn't entirely true. As I lay in bed that night, I realized I did have something. I had something Mark could never buy, steal, or replace. I had trust. The next morning, I drove to the bank and opened a business account with my severance money. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get started. Then I went to the office supply store and bought business cards, letterhead, and a simple sign for my home office door. Vantage Point Consulting, I told the clerk. VANTAGE. Nice name, she said. What kind of consulting? The kind that comes from experience, I replied. My first official call as the owner of Vantage Point Consulting was to Tom Bradley. Tom, it's David. I wanted to let you know about my new professional situation. Thank God you called. That Chad kid called us 3 more times yesterday. Each time he had a different story about our contract terms. We were about to cancel everything. Well, I have a proposition for you. I'm starting my own consulting firm. I can provide the same services you've been getting, but with more personal attention and better rates. Interested? Tom didn't hesitate for even a second. Where do I sign? Within 2 hours, Tom had sent me a signed contract. Bradley Manufacturing was officially my first client. The contract was for 20% less than what they had been paying Innovate Corp, but it represented more revenue for me than I had ever seen in a single deal. But I wasn't done. I called Lisa Chen next. David, I was hoping you'd call. How fast can you set up a meeting? Because we need to make some changes to our service provider. How does tomorrow morning sound? Perfect. And David, bring a contract. We're ready to sign. By the end of the week, I had meetings scheduled with 6 former clients. By the end of the month, 5 of them had signed contracts with Vantage Point Consulting. I wasn't poaching clients. I wasn't bad-mouthing Innovate Corp. I was simply letting people know where they could find me if they needed my services. The fact that they were all desperate to leave Mark's disaster of a department was just a happy coincidence. Word spread quickly in our industry. Companies talk to each other, especially when they're unhappy with their service providers. Stories about Chad's incompetence and Mark's aggressive tactics were making the rounds at industry events and business lunches. Did you hear about Innovate Corp? Became a common conversation starter. 3 months after I was fired, my phone rang with a call I wasn't expecting. David, this is Patricia Williams from Innovate Corp's executive team. We need to talk. Patricia was Mark's boss. She was the VP who had hired him and supported his modernization efforts. I had met her a few times over the years, but we had never worked closely together. What can I do for you, Patricia? David, I'm going to be direct. We're having some challenges with client retention in Mark's division. Several major accounts have left us recently, and we're trying to understand what happened. I almost laughed. She was calling me for advice on how to fix the mess that Mark had created by firing me. I'm sorry to hear that, I said carefully, but I'm not sure how I can help. I don't work there anymore, remember? Yes, about that. We've been reviewing your termination, and we think there may have been some misunderstandings. We'd like to discuss bringing you back in a senior consulting role. Now I did laugh, out loud. Patricia, 3 months ago, your director of sales told me I was too old and slow for the modern business world. Now you want me back because that same director has lost half his clients? David, please, let's not get caught up in personality conflicts. We're talking about a significant raise, full benefits, and your own team. I appreciate the offer, but I'm happy where I am. Where you are? David, what are you doing now? I'm running my own consulting firm, Vantage Point Consulting. We specialize in relationship-based client management. You know, the old-fashioned approach that actually works. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. David, you didn't take any clients with you, did you? Patricia, I didn't take anyone. They came to me. There's a difference. After I hung up, I realized that call meant only one thing. Mark was in serious trouble. I was right. 2 weeks later, Sarah came into my office with a big smile on her face. You need to see this, she said, handing me her laptop. On the screen was a LinkedIn post from someone who still worked at Innovate Corp. It was a generic new opportunities post, but the comments told the real story. Sorry to see you go, Mark. The company is making some tough decisions right now. Best of luck in your next role. Change is never easy. Hope you land somewhere that appreciates your innovative approach. Mark had been fired. I felt a surge of satisfaction that surprised me with its intensity. For months, I had been the one feeling worthless, questioning my abilities, wondering if I really was too old and slow. Now Mark was the one packing his belongings into a cardboard box. But my satisfaction was nothing compared to what happened next. A month later, I got a call from Jennifer Walsh, one of my newer clients. David, I just heard the craziest thing. Innovate Corp is shutting down their entire regional sales division. Apparently, they lost so much revenue that they can't justify keeping it open. I had to sit down. The whole division? The whole thing. They're laying off everyone and consolidating operations at their headquarters. Word is they lost over 70% of their major accounts in the past 6 months. 70%. That was almost every client I had worked with during my time there. 6 months after Mark fired me for being too old and slow, his entire division was gone. The young and energetic team he had built was unemployed. The modern sales techniques he had championed were proven worthless. The old-fashioned relationship-based approach he had mocked was the only thing that actually worked. And I was busier than I had ever been in my life. Vantage Point Consulting had grown from a one-man operation in my home office to a real company with real employees. I had hired 2 other old and slow sales veterans who had been pushed out by companies that valued youth over experience. Together, we were building something special. My new office was in a converted warehouse downtown. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. The walls were covered with thank you notes from clients and photos from company events. It looked a lot like my old office at Innovate Corp, except better. Because this time, I was in control. The day we moved into our new space, Tom Bradley stopped by with a bottle of champagne and a huge smile. "David, I want you to know something," he said as we stood in my new office. "When Mark fired you, he didn't just lose an employee. He lost the heart and soul of that company. Everything you built, every relationship you created, every bit of trust you earned, that was the real value of Innovate Corp. And he threw it all away because he thought you were too old." "Well," I said, raising my glass of champagne, "I guess I showed him what this old guy could do." "You didn't just show him," Tom laughed. "You destroyed him." As I looked around my bustling office, filled with clients and employees who respected my experience instead of dismissing it, I realized Tom was right. Mark's cruel words, "too old and slow," had become the foundation of my greatest success. The young, energetic approach he valued so much had crashed and burned. The relationships I had built over decades had proven unbreakable. The experience he saw as a liability had become my greatest asset. 6 months after getting fired, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. My company was growing, my clients were happy, and my bank account was healthier than it had ever been. But the best part wasn't the money or the success. The best part was the phone call I got on a Tuesday afternoon, exactly 6 months to the day after Mark had fired me. "Is this David Williams from Vantage Point Consulting?" "Yes, who's calling?" "This is Mark Peterson. I used to be your supervisor at Innovate Corp." My heart started beating faster. Mark's voice sounded different, smaller, less confident. "I remember you, Mark. What can I do for you?" "David, I want to apologize. For everything. The way I treated you was wrong. You were right about the relationship-based approach. You were right about everything." I waited for him to continue. "I've been out of work for 2 months now. No one wants to hire someone who lost 70% of their division's revenue. I was wondering, do you have any openings at your firm? I know I don't deserve it, but..." "Mark," I interrupted gently, "I appreciate the apology. I really do, but I'm afraid we don't have any positions available right now." It wasn't entirely true. We were actually looking for someone to handle our growing client load. But that someone needed to understand the value of experience, relationships, and trust. Someone who knew that age and wisdom weren't weaknesses to be overcome, but strengths to be celebrated. Mark wasn't that someone. "I understand," he said quietly. "David, for what it's worth, I learned something from all this. Age and experience aren't liabilities. They're everything." After he hung up, I sat in my office thinking about how much had changed in 6 months. Mark had learned his lesson, but it was too late. The damage was done to his career, to his reputation, and to the division he had destroyed with his arrogance. Meanwhile, I was building something better than I had ever imagined possible. That evening, I came home to find Sarah in the kitchen, cooking dinner and humming happily. She looked up when I walked in and smiled. "Good day at the office, honey?" I thought about my bustling company, my happy clients, my dedicated employees, and the phone call from Mark that had finally closed the book on this chapter of my life. "Yeah," I said, kissing her cheek. "Really good day." "You know what I'm proudest of?" Sarah asked as we sat down to dinner. "What's that?" "You proved that being too old and slow was exactly what the world needed." She was right. Mark's insult had become my superpower. His cruelty had become my motivation. His biggest mistake had become my greatest opportunity. 6 months after being fired for being too old and slow, I had built a consulting empire on the foundation of experience, relationships, and trust. I had proven that sometimes the old way is the best way. And I had shown Mark and everyone else who had ever been dismissed because of their age that wisdom and experience are worth more than youth and energy. Best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting better. And I had never been better in my life. Sometimes the person who sees you as outdated is actually the one who's behind the times. Age isn't a weakness, it's a competitive advantage that can't be taught, bought, or replaced. And when someone tries to throw away decades of experience, they usually learn too late that they've just handed their biggest asset to their competition. Please like and subscribe for more.